My wife told me turn down that promotion or we're done after I landed the biggest opportunity of my career, so I quietly accepted it, prepared my exit move to Denver, and filed for divorce. Here I am, 32, male, sitting in my new empty apartment. 3 weeks ago, I got the call every railroad guy dreams about. Yard supervisor position with BNSF Railway at their main Denver hub. Not just any supervisor job. This was the fast track to trainmaster, eventually division superintendent, if I played my cards right. The money was stupid good. $78,000 base salary, but with guaranteed overtime. We're talking $120,000 plus, probably pushing $140,000 with holiday pay and hazard bonuses, full benefits, railroad retirement, and a pension that actually means something. This was generational money, the kind that sets your kids up for college and lets you actually retire. I've been married to Andrea for 6 years. She's 29, works part-time at a dental office, making $18 an hour when she shows up. Always complaining about wanting a bigger house, nicer car. Vacations that don't involve camping at my buddy's lake cabin. This job would solve every financial problem we'd ever had. Been working as a conductor for 8 years, grinding freight lines through Iowa and Nebraska. Long hours, terrible weather, dangerous work most people don't have the guts for, but I've been building toward this. Getting off the trains, making real money behind a desk instead of freezing my butt off. When I got home Tuesday evening, I was pumped. Everything I'd worked for since high school when I chose making money over accumulating debt. Studying liberal arts nonsense. Years of proving myself and building a reputation as a guy who gets stuff done. The regional supervisor specifically requested me out of hundreds who wanted it. Andrea was watching some reality TV, garbage glass in hand. She gave me that bored look she'd perfected. The same one for telemarketers or door-to-door salesmen. I launched into the whole thing. The call promotion opportunity. Probably sounded like a kid who just made varsity, but I didn't care. This was huge. Her response: "That's nice, babe. Can you grab me the chips and maybe open another bottle while you're up?" Didn't mute the TV. Didn't put down her drink. Didn't pretend to care about the biggest moment of my career. I stood there processing whether she'd actually heard me. I tried again, slower this time, like explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever. What this meant financially, how this was the break I'd worked toward my whole adult life, how we could finally afford all the stuff she constantly complained about not having. That's when she finally looked at me and asked the question, "When do you start looking for something local?" I laughed because I thought she was confused. This was the job, Andrea. Denver was only 6 hours from our Nebraska town, but she was dead serious, with that entitled expression she got when reality didn't conform to her expectations. "You're not actually thinking about taking this, are you?" Just like that, the excitement drained from the room. What happened next was a 4-hour argument that went nowhere, except it taught me exactly who I'd married. Andrea made her position clear. This wasn't happening. Not the job, not the move, not even discussing it like adults. She had her life here, and that was apparently sacred. Let me paint you a picture of her life here. We lived in Grand Island, Nebraska. The most exciting thing that happened was when Walmart got a McDonald's inside it. People talked about it for months like we'd landed on Mars. Her career involved answering phones at a dental office and occasionally cleaning instruments. Her social circle was 3 women whose hobbies were trash-talking their husbands and planning girls' nights at Applebee's, where they'd complain for hours while doing nothing to improve their situations. But this was the life she couldn't abandon, her Shangri-La. "I'm not moving to some expensive city where I don't know anyone," she said, like Denver was Mars. "My whole support system is here." Support system. Her mom, who lived 20 minutes away and called when she needed money or someone to complain about. Her sister Maria, who'd managed 2 marriages and divorces by age 26. Her work friends who spent time planning elaborate schemes to call in sick without getting fired. I tried every reasonable compromise I could think of. What if I took the job and we visited Denver on weekends? Too much driving. What if she stayed here while I got settled, then joined me? Long distance never works. What if we drove out for a weekend so she could see the city? She rolled her eyes and told me to stop being ridiculous. Every suggestion got shot down before I could finish explaining it. This was her explaining what I was going to do like I was a slow child. And what I was going to do was call them back and turn down the job so we could keep living in Nowheresville, Nebraska. Here's what I'd ignored for 6 years. Probably because I was thinking with the wrong head when I proposed. Every major decision had gone Andrea's way. Where we lived, her choice close to family because God forbid she'd drive more than 20 minutes to see her mother. Vacations always somewhere she picked, usually with her sister tagging along. What car she drove. I was making payments on a Jeep Cherokee because she said my reliable pickup was embarrassing. Weekends, whatever she wanted, shopping for stuff we couldn't afford, or visiting her family while I sat ignored and treated like an ATM with legs. I'd convinced myself this was marriage. Happy wife, happy life, right? Except I was the only one making sacrifices, and she was never happy anyway. Nothing was ever enough. This job was my line in the sand, not because I wanted to be difficult, but because this was about whether I'd spend the rest of my life letting someone else decide what I could achieve. When she realized I wasn't immediately giving in like always, she brought out the heavy artillery. "You're being selfish," she said, hands on hips like she was addressing a disappointing child. "Andrea, you know darn well I want to take the promotion to give you the life you always wanted. What the heck is wrong with you? Yeah. Whatever. Real husbands don't abandon their wives for money. If you really loved me, you wouldn't even consider leaving me behind. And real wives support their husbands." I shot back. She didn't like it. My brother Alan called that evening while Andrea was upstairs taking one of her hour-long baths. He's a mechanic married to his high school sweetheart for 10 years. "Dude, you'd be crazy not to take that job. Railroad supervisors make bank, and Denver's a great city." "What's Andrea's problem?" When I explained her position, there was silence. I could hear him trying to process the logic. Man, Chloe would have my bags packed before I hung up the phone. She'd probably drive me there herself and help me find an apartment. That hit hard because he was right. A partner who actually cared about my success would have been excited. Researching neighborhoods and opportunities, proud her husband got promoted instead of treating it like I'd announced I was joining a cult. I looked at this woman I'd promised to love and honor back when I was young and stupid and said the only thing I could. "Andrea, I'd never force you to move with me." She smiled, kissed my cheek like I was a good boy who'd learned his lesson and wouldn't challenge her authority again. "Smart choice. Call them tomorrow and say thanks, but no thanks. There'll be other opportunities." Other opportunities. I did call them the next day, though, to accept the position and ask when they needed me to start. I know how this sounds, like I'm some liar who deceived his wife and bailed without warning. But 6 years of marriage to Andrea had taught me exactly how she handled conflict. Think less mature adult discussion and more complete meltdown with extra drama. If she knew I was planning to take the job, she would have made those 2 weeks hell on earth. Screaming matches heard from space involving her entire family, probably showing up at my work crying about being abandoned. I'd seen her playbook when Maria got divorced. She became a one-person psychological warfare unit specializing in making everyone within 50 miserable. So I kept my mouth shut and started planning my exit in silence. The first thing I did was talk to my buddy Mike from work. Mike's been divorced twice, so he knows the drill for protecting yourself financially. We grabbed drinks after shift and I laid out the situation. "Dude, you need to document everything before you make a move," he said. "Bank statements, asset lists, photos of what's yours versus hers. Divorce lawyers are expensive, but getting screwed in court is more expensive. Trust me, I've got the scars." Mike was right. I'd been supporting Andrea's lifestyle for years while she spent money, like she had a printing press in the basement. If this went sideways, and with Andrea everything eventually went sideways, I needed proof. I quietly opened my own checking account at a different bank and started moving my paychecks there. But I didn't just move money. I spent 2 weeks photographing every bill receipt bank statement from the past 3 years. Everything with my name showing exactly who'd been funding our lifestyle. We'd always kept separate accounts anyway because Andrea didn't want me monitoring her spending, which was fine considering her idea of money management was buying whatever she wanted. The company was incredibly generous with relocation, full moving expenses, temporary housing for a month, help finding a permanent place. All I had to do was give them a start date. I picked a Monday when Andrea would be at her sister's for their weekly girls' day. Sorting through 6 years of marriage was weird. I made detailed lists of mine, hers, and ours. I was more than fair, probably too fair, but I wanted to sleep at night knowing I hadn't screwed her over, even though she'd spent 6 years screwing me over, financially and emotionally. Living room furniture we'd bought together left it. Bedroom set I'd paid for but we'd both used left it. The 60-inch TV I'd bought for football season left it too. I took my clothes tools, fishing gear, personal stuff, and the paid-off pickup in my name. Everything else could stay with her. The hardest part was writing the letter. How do you explain to someone you've been married to for 6 years that you're disappearing? 15 drafts later. I explained that I'd accepted the position meant what I said about not forcing her to move, that rent was paid through month end, and that I'd filed for legal separation to protect us both financially. I left it on the kitchen counter with my house key, a $3,000 cashier check for her expenses, and a business card for a reputable divorce attorney. Not mine, but someone who could represent her fairly. Even angry, I wasn't leaving her completely hanging. The movers were professionals, showed up at 8 a.m. sharp, had my stuff packed and loaded in 4 hours. I'd marked everything with blue tape so they knew what to grab. Standing in that house one last time, looking at empty spaces where my stuff used to be, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in years, and it felt incredible. My phone started going crazy around 3:00 p.m. that Monday, right when Andrea would have gotten back from her sister's and discovered half the furniture was gone with a legal separation notice sitting on the kitchen counter. I was at a truck stop outside Denver watching notifications pile up. What the heck is happening? Where are you? Call me right now. You freaking coward. Answer your phone. This is not legal. You can't just take my stuff. My stuff. Everything was hers when convenient, but bills were never her responsibility. The calls came in waves, each probably more unhinged than the last. Every ring I could picture her pacing around like a caged animal looking for something else to blame me for. I let them all go to voicemail. After about 30 missed calls in 2 hours, I sent one text. I told you I wouldn't force you to move. The lawyer will contact you about the separation paperwork. The rent is paid through month end. Good luck. Then I blocked her number, which should have been the end of it, but wasn't. My first day at the new job was everything I'd hoped for. The rail yard was massive, organized, and run by people who actually knew what they were doing. My new boss, Tom, was a 25-year railroad veteran who'd worked his way up from conductor like me, so he understood the work. During lunch, he laid out a career path that could have me making 6 figures within 2 years if I kept my nose clean and work ethic strong. Good supervisors are hard to find, Tom said. You come recommended from people I trust, so don't make me look stupid. I won't, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. Save the sir nonsense for executives. It's Tom. Now go home and get some rest. Tomorrow we start. The temporary housing was basic but clean, and for the first time in years I could watch whatever I wanted without someone complaining that sports were boring. The show was waiting that evening, though, because Andrea had found ways around the blocked number. My mom called first, and I could tell from her voice she'd been recruited into Andrea's program. Dennis, Andrea is hysterical. Maria called me crying, saying you just abandoned them both. What's going on, them both? Like I'd been married to Maria, too. Mom, I got promoted to railroad supervisor in Denver. Andrea refused to even consider moving with me, so I took the job anyway. Well, you can't just leave your wife behind, Dennis. That's not how marriage works. Yeah, but apparently being expected to turn down career opportunities to keep your wife comfortable in a dead-end town was exactly how marriage worked. Maria called next, and this conversation was a real treat. Dennis, you're being a complete jerk. Andrea is devastated. She's been crying for 6 hours straight. Maria, I offered every compromise I could think of. She shot down every single suggestion because you were being unreasonable. You can't expect her to just uproot her entire life for your job, right? Her part-time job and weekly Applebee's trips with women who had nothing better to do than complain about their marriages, the life apparently more valuable than a $120,000 railroad career. You're the husband, Dennis. You're supposed to take care of her. I hung up. Mike called around 9:00 p.m. with a heads up that made my day both better and worse. Dude, Andrea's been calling everyone at the yard trying to get them to convince you to come back. She told Joe you had some kind of mental breakdown and made an irrational decision. She's also telling people you cleaned out your joint savings account and left her with nothing. We didn't have a joint savings account. I had a savings account I'd been putting money into for 3 years, while she spent every penny on clothes and restaurants and drinks. But Andrea had never been one to let facts get in the way of a good victim story. Oh, and she asked me for your new address, said she needed to send you some important paperwork. Don't give it to her. Chill, bro. I wasn't planning on it, but heads up. She's not taking this well. No kidding, Mike. Thanks for the update. Day 3 brought a phone call from my father-in-law, Bob. A man who'd spent 6 years treating me like some kind of inconvenience his daughter had to put up with. Dennis, what you've done is unforgivable. You've destroyed my daughter. The woman was 29 years old with a job and a paid-up house. Bob, I accepted a promotion. Andrea chose not to support that decision. Supported, you expected her to abandon everything for your selfishness. This railroad job isn't even real career advancement, Dennis. It's just more blue-collar work with fancier titles. That hit me wrong, and I could feel my temper rising. Bob had spent his entire career as an insurance salesman, never made more than $40,000 in his best year. But somehow he was qualified to judge my career choices. Bob, I'll be making more money in my first year than you've ever made in any single year of your entire career. There was a pause, and I could practically hear his brain trying to process that information. Well, money isn't everything, Dennis. Family is what matters. You're absolutely right. Which is why it's so disappointing that your daughter doesn't consider me family enough to support my career. He hung up on me. By the end of my first week, Andrea had decided to take her one-woman victim show to social media. Maria had been sending Mike screenshots of Andrea's Facebook posts, and holy cow, she was going for gold in the Victim Olympics while competing for most delusional human on the internet. When you support a man through his struggling years, only to be abandoned the moment he gets a promotion. Ladies, remember, if he'll leave you for a job, he was never committed to the marriage. Abandoned wife. The post had 50 comments, mostly from her friends and family, calling me everything from a narcissist to a sociopath who'd used Andrea for emotional support and dumped her when I didn't need her anymore. These were people who'd known me for years, who'd been to our house. But Andrea's victim story was apparently more compelling than their own experiences with me because people love drama more than truth. Then came posts with pictures of our empty bedroom with the caption, "This is what till death do us part." Looks like to some people. 6 years down the drain because money matters more than love. A photo of her crying with the caption, "When you realize 6 years meant nothing to the person you thought you'd grow old with." And my personal favorite, if anyone knows any good divorce lawyers who work on contingency, please message me. Also looking for recommendations for private investigators because something doesn't add up about this job offer. The delusion was reaching levels that should probably be studied by psychologists. Mike forwarded me a screenshot from the local railroad workers Facebook group where Maria had posted on Andrea's behalf. "My sister's husband just abandoned her for a fake supervisor job in Denver. Can anyone confirm if BNSF actually hires people this way or if this is some kind of scam? We're starting to think he's having an affair and made up this whole story to cover it up. A fake job. An affair." Interesting. They were so committed to the villain narrative rather than admit Andrea has handled this like a spoiled child. 3 people from the railroad group actually contacted Mike to confirm that, yes, BNSF does hire supervisors, and no, it's not a scam. But facts weren't the point anymore. The most ridiculous development came when I got a Facebook message from Andrea's cousin Amy, who I'd met maybe twice in 6 years, making her an expert on absolutely nothing related to the situation. "Dennis, I think you should know that Andrea is planning to drive to Denver to work things out with you. She's been talking about getting a hotel room and staying until you come to your senses. I thought you deserved a heads up because honestly, she's not acting rational about this." And great. So now I had to worry about her showing up at my work or housing to cause a scene that would probably end up on YouTube under "Crazy Wife Confronts Husband at Railroad Yard, Gone Wrong." I forwarded the message to Tom and explained the situation, expecting him to be concerned about workplace drama. "Here's the thing, Dennis," he said when I knocked on his office door. "I could tell you not to worry about it, but you seem like a guy who thinks ahead, so let's think ahead together." He pulled out a notepad and started writing. "Security knows your situation now. If she shows up, they'll handle it professionally but firmly. I'm documenting this conversation so there's a paper trail if we need it later. And here's the number for our employee assistance program. They deal with this more than you'd think." He looked up from his notes. "You came here to do a job and you're doing it well. Don't let personal drama derail that. Smart men prepare for problems before they happen." That evening, I got a call from Alan with an update. It was both hilarious and disturbing. "Dude, Andrea showed up at Mom's house today with a whole presentation about why you're making a mistake. Had freaking pie charts and everything showing how much more expensive it is to live in Denver versus Nebraska. Pie charts. She'd made actual pie charts. Mom was polite. But she told me afterward that Andrea seemed genuinely unhinged. She kept saying you'd had some kind of personality change and that the real Dennis would never abandon his family. She also asked Mom if she thought you might be on drugs. The guy who'd spent 6 years putting Andrea's comfort ahead of his own ambitions, working overtime to pay for her shopping sprees and drinking habits, never once asking her to sacrifice anything for his benefit or their future together. Yeah, that Dennis was gone and good riddance to him. Oh, and she left a folder of printed emails at Mom's house. Something about evidence that you've been planning this for months. Mom threw it away, but she said it was just screenshots of you researching Denver apartments and job listings. The woman had completely lost her mind, and apparently she was taking a scenic route through crazy town. 3 weeks into my new job, I was leaving the Railard around 6:00 p.m. when I saw her. Andrea was standing next to my pickup truck in the employee parking lot, her hair done up like she was going to prom makeup that could probably be seen from space, wearing this dress way too fancy and way too tight. This was Andrea's win him back look, and it was both pathetic and terrifying. "We need to talk," she said like she had any right to demand my time. "No, we don't. How the heck did you even get in here?" I told security I was your wife and that it was a family emergency. They were very helpful once I started crying. "Of course she did. Andrea, this is my workplace. You can't just show up here uninvited. I'm still your wife, Dennis. I have rights. Rights to stalk me at work and cause scenes in front of my new coworkers against my better judgment. And I mean really, really against it. I agreed to get coffee at a nearby truck stop, but before we left, I texted Mike. Andrea showed up at work having coffee at the Shell on 5th. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call the cops. Partly because I didn't want to cause a scene at my new job, but mostly because I'd learned the best way to handle Andrea's drama. The conversation was fascinating in its complete disconnect from reality. Like watching someone try to convince you that up is down. She'd clearly rehearsed this whole performance. Probably practiced it in the mirror while listening to whatever empowerment podcast. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her coffee. "Maybe I was too quick to dismiss the Denver idea. It could be an adventure, you know, like when we were dating and everything was exciting. Andrea, you made your position very clear. You weren't moving for my career. You said I was selfish for even considering it. I was scared, Dennis. You sprung it on me out of nowhere and I reacted badly. But I've been doing research and there are actually some good opportunities here. I could work at a bigger dental office, maybe even go back to school for dental hygiene like I always talked about. And there it was. She'd done the math on my new salary and realized what kind of lifestyle it could fund. The bigger opportunities that were suddenly appealing now that she knew I'd be making six figures instead of just talking about it. That's great, Andrea. But we're separated. I filed the paperwork. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds before settling on that wounded look she'd perfected over the years. Separated. Dennis, people don't just separate over job disagreements. Marriage means working through problems together. You didn't want to work through anything. You wanted me to turn down the promotion and stay in Nebraska so you wouldn't have to leave your comfort zone. That's when she dropped the bomb that explained everything about the last 6 years and probably saved me from wasting the next 60. I was testing you, Dennis. I wanted to see if you'd choose me over money, if you really loved me enough to sacrifice for our marriage. 6 years of marriage, and she was still playing high school relationship games like we were teenagers. When I didn't cave to her ultimatum like I always had before her whole world fell apart. Andrea, adults don't test each other. They support each other. They communicate. What followed was 20 minutes of her cycling through every manipulation technique. I'd seen this before. So I just sat back and let her run through it while I drank my coffee. First came the guilt. I've supported you through everything, Dennis. I was there when you were just a conductor making $45,000, when you were working terrible hours and coming home exhausted. I could have left you then, but I didn't. I just nodded and said, "You're right. Those were tough years." Then the anger came. You're just like every other man. The minute you make decent money, you forget about the woman who stood by you. You probably already have some Denver woman picked out to replace me with. Again, I stayed calm. I understand you're upset, but personal attacks aren't going to help either of us figure this out. But the bargaining came next. We could try the long-distance thing for a while. See how it works out. That's an idea. I said space. Now she wanted space after spending 6 years making sure I never made any decision without her approval. When none of that worked, she tried playing victim. Do you know what this has done to my reputation? Everyone in town knows you left me. I can't even go to the grocery store without people staring and whispering. My own mother asked me what I did to drive you away, like it was some mystery instead of the obvious result of years of unsupportive behavior and manipulation. Finally, when all else failed, she played her nuclear option, the one I'd been expecting since the moment she showed up. Fine. If you want to throw away our marriage for this job, then you owe me compensation for the years I invested in us. I owe you what alimony, spousal support, whatever you want to call it. I gave up 6 years of my life for this marriage. I could have been building my own career, dating other people, traveling, living my life, supported my career by working part-time and spending every penny I made. I want half your pension, half your railroad retirement benefits, and $2,000 a month in spousal support until I can get back on my feet. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder labeled Financial Records, scrolled through bank statements, payment histories, tax documents, all organized and time-stamped. Andrea, I've been documenting our finances for 3 years. Would you like to see what percentage of our household expenses you've covered versus what I've covered? She looked confused, like this wasn't going according to her script, because I can show you exactly how much you've contributed to our joint financial goals, what your employment history looks like, and what Nebraska Family Court typically awards in situations like ours, and it's not what you're asking for. I kept my voice calm like I was discussing the weather. And if you don't agree to that voluntarily, I'll take you to court and make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Andrea, you're not getting half my pension or spousal support. Then I'll sue you for everything you're worth. My lawyer says I have a good case for abandonment and emotional distress. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a business card, slid it across the table to her. That's the lawyer I researched for you. She's good. She's fair, and she'll give you realistic expectations about what you can actually get. I stood up and put a 20 on the table for both our coffees. And Andrea, I've been documenting everything since the day I got the job offer. If you want to make this ugly, that's your choice. But I came prepared for that possibility too. She stood up, then knocking her chair back loud enough that half the truck stop turned to look at us. You'll regret this, Dennis. When you're sitting alone in your apartment, eating frozen dinners and working ridiculous hours for people who don't give a darn about you, you'll realize what you lost. I already know what I lost. Someone who thought marriage meant I existed to fund her lifestyle while she contributed nothing. I'm actually pretty happy with that trade. She stormed out, but not before trying one last manipulation. Your mother was right about you. She said you'd always been selfish and that I was too good for you. My mother, the woman who taught me the value of hard work and self-reliance. Yeah, she definitely thought I was selfish for taking a promotion. Sweetheart, my mother threw away your evidence and told you to stop coming to her house. But sure, let's pretend she's on your side. The look on her face was worth the 8 hours of driving she'd wasted to come here. That confrontation at the truck stop was 6 weeks ago. And honestly, it was the closure I didn't know I needed. Seeing Andrea in full manipulation mode, cycling through every guilt trip and power play in her arsenal like she was working through a manual, just confirmed I'd made the right choice and probably saved myself decades of misery. But the story doesn't end there, because Andrea's capacity for self-destruction apparently knows no bounds, and she was just getting warmed up for the real stuff. First, she drove back to Nebraska and tried to turn our separation into some kind of community cause. Posted on every local Facebook group about how railroad companies were destroying families by requiring workers to relocate for promotions. Started a petition to keep Nebraska families together that got exactly 12 signatures before people realized it was complete nonsense. The petition was actually hilarious. I had Mike screenshot it before it got taken down. The whole thing read like it had been written by someone who'd never had a real job and didn't understand how careers worked in the adult world. Then she decided to take her victim tour to the Nebraska Department of Labor, filing a formal complaint that BNSF was engaging in discriminatory hiring practices by requiring supervisors to work at their main facilities instead of letting them work remotely from whatever small town their wives preferred. The complaint got dismissed within a week. But not before she'd wasted state employees' time with her delusions about how employment law worked. According to Mike, Andrea also tried to get a job at the bank where my mom works part-time. Apparently, she thought having a family connection would help her case when the divorce proceedings started. The bank manager took one look at her employment history: 6 different jobs in 4 years, multiple unexplained absences, and a habit of calling in sick on Mondays that was so consistent you could set your calendar by it, and politely suggested she look elsewhere. She's now working at a call center for $12 an hour. The job involves getting yelled at by angry customers all day, which is probably good practice for her next marriage. She's also living with her sister Maria, who's apparently getting tired of funding her legal fantasies and emotional meltdowns. Maria called Alan last week to see how Dennis was doing, which was really code for find out if he's willing to come back, so Andrea will stop being my burden. Alan's response was beautiful. Dennis is doing great, making more money than he's ever made, living in a city that has restaurants and culture. He's basically living his best life, while Andrea is working at a call center and sleeping on her sister's couch. How do you think that's going to work out? The divorce papers got served 3 weeks ago, and Andrea's lawyer sent me a settlement demand that was so ridiculous I had to frame it and hang it in my kitchen as a conversation piece. She wanted half my pension, half my railroad benefits, the pickup truck spousal support of $3,500 a month for at least 5 years while she rebuilds her career. And get this: damages for emotional distress and loss of future earning potential. Her career at the call center making $12 an hour. The career she was apparently going to rebuild into something worth $3,500 a month in support payments. The loss of future earning potential was my favorite part. According to her lawyer's logic, being married to me had somehow prevented her from achieving her full professional potential, which was apparently much higher than working part-time at a dental office for 6 years. My lawyer's response was a professional way of saying, go pound sand. Nebraska's alimony laws don't favor housewives who worked part-time by choice while their husbands paid all the bills. We sent Andrea's legal team bank statements showing that I'd paid 90% of our living expenses for 6 years, while she spent her paychecks on whatever caught her attention on any given day. The really fun part was when her lawyer tried to argue that Andrea deserved credit for emotional support and household management. My lawyer's response included photographs of our house during the separation, showing dishes piled in the sink, laundry scattered everywhere, and empty bottles lined up on the counter, like trophies, emotional support, and household management. Right? Meanwhile, my actual life has gotten really better, to the point where I sometimes feel guilty about how good things are going. Found a great apartment near downtown Denver with a view of the mountains that cost less than what I was paying for that rental house in Nebraska. The apartment has amenities I didn't even know existed: a gym, a pool, a business center, and decent neighbors. Got my first performance review at work, and Tom pulled me into his office with a folder full of notes. Dennis, I'm going to be straight with you. When we hired you, we expected good things, but you've exceeded every expectation we had. He opened the folder and showed me efficiency reports, safety metrics, crew, feedback forms. Your teams are hitting production targets ahead of schedule. Your safety record is spotless, and the guys actually want to work shifts when you're supervising. That's rare. He leaned back in his chair. I've already talked to the regional manager about fast-tracking you for trainmaster training. If you keep this up, you'll be making 6 figures before your 2nd anniversary here. The overtime was real and substantial, and my first monthly paycheck was more than I used to make in 6 weeks back in Nebraska. But more than the money, I was finally working somewhere that recognized competence and rewarded performance, instead of just expecting you to be grateful for having a job. Started dating too. Her name's Sarah. She's a dispatcher for the railroad. And when I told her about getting the promotion, her response was, "That's amazing. Denver is such a cool city. I bet you're excited about the opportunities here." She actually has her own career goals and her own life, which means she doesn't need me to be her entire entertainment system and financial support. The funniest part of all this happened last week when my mom called with news from the old neighborhood. "Dennis, I ran into Andrea at the grocery store yesterday. She looked terrible. She tried to corner me by the produce section to talk about how you'd abandoned your responsibilities as a husband. What did you tell her?" "I told her that if she ever showed up at my house again, I'd call the police and have her arrested. I love my mom." "Oh, and she asked me if I thought you'd be willing to work things out if she apologized and promised to move to Denver. I told her that ship had sailed, crashed into an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean where it belonged." So that's the story, Reddit. And here's what 6 years of marriage to Andrea taught me. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. When they think love means control and manipulation, choose your freedom. Don't waste your time, folks.